I wasn't born to be loved. My life didn't start with a name. It started with commands, with drills, with silence between orders. No one ever asked what I wanted. They taught me how to find, how to bark, how to bite, and if needed, how to die. But I don't regret any of it, because somewhere in the middle of all that noise and purpose, something unexpected found me. Something like hope. They told me it would be routine, just a search and breach in a run-down trailer park south of Denver. No intel on weapons, no high-threat markers, just another late-night bust in a city that never really sleeps. I'd been on dozens of these before. Kicked indoors, cleared meth labs, chased suspects through back alleys and over fences. I was good at it. Damn good. Back then, I still had my badge, my vest, and my partner, Officer Daniel Ross. We'd been together 3 years. I trusted him more than my own instincts, and I like to think he trusted me more than any man in uniform. That night was cold. Snow had just started to fall, the kind that melts the second it touches concrete, but leaves your nose stinging. We moved in silence, boots crunching soft over gravel, breath fogging the air. Ross gave me the signal, a quick flick of 2 fingers, and I crept forward, low and steady, nose to the ground. The door to the trailer was slightly ajar. That was the first sign something wasn't right. I remember the smell, sweat, blood, motor oil, and fear. I signaled back. There was someone inside. Multiple people, maybe. Ross whispered something into the radio, and then everything went to hell. A shout. A gunshot. Screaming. I lunged through the door before they told me to. It wasn't bravery. It was training. There was a man with a girl, couldn't have been more than 10, tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth. He had a knife, not a cheap one either. Military grade, double-edged, serrated at the base. I didn't think. I went for his arm. I felt the blade before I saw it. It tore down my side like fire, ripping through muscle, scraping bone. But I didn't stop. I clamped down on his wrist, hard, until I felt tendons pop and the knife clatter to the floor. He screamed, and Ross tackled him from behind. The girl was shaking. Blood was everywhere. Mine, his, maybe even hers. Hard to tell. They told me later I saved that girl's life, that I was a hero. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not when they stitched me up and told Ross I wouldn't run again. Not when they sent me to rehab and stopped calling me to train. Not when the badge was taken from my harness, like it had never been mine to carry. "You've done enough," someone said. Enough. What does that even mean to a dog like me? I wasn't tired. I wasn't done. But they were. And that was the end of it. A week later, they brought me to a place outside Tulsa. Said it was a retirement kennel, but it felt more like limbo. Concrete floors, steel gates, barking echoing off walls like ghosts, screaming in a cave. The handlers were kind, in that distant professional way people use when they've seen too much. I had a name tag, Rex, but no one ever used it. They tapped on my crate with plastic clipboards and called me K9, male number 2470. I stopped eating for a while. Didn't mean to, just couldn't bring myself to care. The pain was worse at night, not the wound, though it ached in the cold, but the silence. You get used to radio static, to commands shouted from across the yard, to the thump of boots and the scent of gun oil. When all that's gone, it's like your heartbeat has nothing left to sync with. Sometimes I'd dream of that girl, the one in the chair. I don't even know her name. but I'd see her eyes, wide, wet, and terrified, and I'd wonder if she remembered me, if she ever thought about the dog who bled to keep her breathing. Other times, I'd dream of Ross. The way he scratched behind my ears when we rode back from a bust. The way he always whispered, "You're a good boy," after every shift, like it was a secret between us. He never came to visit, not once. The days bled into each other. Dogs came and went. Some got adopted. Some didn't. I stayed. I guess I was waiting. For what, I couldn't say. A second chance. A familiar face. Maybe just for someone to look at me and not see a scarred animal with one leg that didn't work right. One afternoon, a volunteer walked by my kennel. Young girl. Long red braid, freckles. She stopped, tilted her head at me. "This one's a war dog," she told someone behind her. "You can tell by the eyes." No one replied, but something about the way she said it made me sit up straighter. The truth is, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Without the vest, without the sirens, without Ross. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a pet. I was something in between. A creature stitched together by instinct and memory, living off the echo of commands I no longer received. And then, one morning, everything changed. She walked in small, quiet, and alone in the way only a child can be when they've lost something they can't name. Her mother held her hand, but the girl didn't hold back. She let her arm dangle, her fingers limp, like they didn't know how to grasp anything anymore. Her eyes, God, her eyes, were as hollow as the nights in that kennel. Her name was Lily. I knew the second I smelled her. Pain, trauma, fear. Buried deep, but still burning under the surface like coal under snow. They brought her to me, not the other dogs. Me, and I knew why. Not because I was the friendliest, not because I was healed, but because somehow, someone believed that I could understand her the way others couldn't. They were right. She didn't speak, not one word, not even when they begged her. But she didn't run either. She didn't look away. She just stared at me like maybe, just maybe, I could keep her world from collapsing further. And I thought, maybe I could. Maybe that's what I was still here for. Maybe this was the mission I didn't know I needed. Maybe she was the one I was waiting for all along. There's a certain kind of silence that settles into places like that. Kennels meant for the forgotten. It's not the absence of sound. No, there's always barking, always claws scratching on cement, always the hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. But beneath it all, there's a quiet that seeps into your bones. It's the silence of dogs waiting for something that may never come. That's where they sent me after the department signed off my discharge papers. No parade, no ceremony. One minute I was a decorated K9 with a service record pinned on the wall. The next, I was just a liability they couldn't afford to carry. "He's got too much scar tissue on the flank," the vet had said. "Mobility's compromised. He's not fit for duty anymore." That was the phrase they liked to use. Unfit for duty. The place was called Silver Pines Rehabilitation Rescue, just a few miles off the I-44 in northern Oklahoma. It sounded peaceful. It wasn't. It was a warehouse with chain-link kennels and cement floors, built to hold dogs like me, too broken to be adopted, too expensive to keep. I remember the first day they brought me in. The guy driving the transport van didn't say a word the whole trip. When we pulled up, the gate buzzed open like a prison door. A young woman in scrubs opened my crate and led me to kennel number 14. She clipped my leash to the wall, then closed the gate behind me with a soft clang. That was it. No goodbye from the department. No nameplate. Just the sound of the lock sliding into place. I paced at first. 4 steps forward. Turn. 4 steps back. That's all the space I had. The other dogs barked at me for a while. I didn't bark back. I didn't feel like a dog anymore. I felt like a shadow trying to remember what it once meant to belong somewhere. They didn't call me Rex. They didn't call me anything. In the daily logs, I was K9 male number 2470. Feeding at 7, cleaning at 11, evaluation every other Tuesday. My whole life, reduced to a clipboard and a chain-link square. Some of the dogs barked all day. Others stared at the wall like they were waiting for it to open and lead them somewhere else. A few were like me, quiet, still, listening to memories that no one else could hear. There was an old Malinois 2 kennels down. Name was Buck, though the staff just called him B32. He was blind in one eye, limped worse than I did, but he had this low, grumbly growl he used when anyone got too close. I respected that. He'd been there longer than anyone else. Rumor was, Buck bit a handler after his partner got shot. They said he never forgave the guy for freezing under pressure. Sometimes at night, Buck would talk to me in that way dogs talk without words. A glance, a shift of weight, the sound of breathing. He knew I was new. He knew I wasn't adjusting. I remember one night in particular. The wind howled through the gaps in the tin roof, and the lights had gone out in our section. It was cold. My scar was burning something fierce. I was curled up against the far wall when Buck growled low and long. He didn't move, didn't look at me. But I understood what he meant. You're not dead yet, so don't act like it. Funny how a sound like that can shake you more than a human shout. The days dragged. The ache in my body faded before the ache in my heart. Every time a person walked past, I'd lift my head. Every time a child came through with their parents, I'd sit up just a little straighter. But no one ever stopped at my gate. No one ever read the file that said I saved a girl from a knife. They didn't see that part. They only saw the limp. The scar. The way my eyes didn't light up when someone said treat. Some of the younger dogs got adopted fast. Puppies mostly. They always do. Their tails wagged like they still believed in things. I was happy for them. But sometimes I couldn't help but feel that cold twist inside. The one that whispers, no one's coming for you. It was the mornings that hurt the most. Right around 5:30, just before feeding, when the world was still grey and quiet, and the staff hadn't arrived yet. That's when I used to train with Ross. Sunrise runs, early drills, scent practice in the dewy grass. He'd kneel beside me, ruffle my ears and say, "Let's go show the world what you're made of." I waited for his voice every morning. It never came. One afternoon, a trainer named Maggie came by my kennel. She was young, college student maybe. She wore an Oklahoma State hoodie, scuffed up sneakers, and always smelled faintly of peanut butter. I liked her because she didn't fake cheerfulness. She didn't crouch and talk in baby voices. She just sat by my gate, clipboard in hand, and watched. "You were with Denver PD, huh?" she said once, more to herself than me. "Search and rescue. 2 commendations, 1 field injury. Hell of a resume, soldier." That was the first time in weeks someone called me anything other than a number. After that, she started spending more time by my kennel. She didn't try to pet me, didn't force toys into my paws like some others did. She just sat, read her notes, hummed now and then, told me about her brother overseas, about how she used to read dog training books like they were bedtime stories. One morning, she brought a brush and asked, "Want to try looking less like a mop today?" I didn't flinch when she opened the gate. That surprised her. "You trust fast," she muttered, running the brush down my back, careful not to touch the scar. "Or maybe you're just done being alone." It wasn't trust. It was something else. A quiet knowing that whatever she carried inside her, it wasn't judgment. It was kindness. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask for anything back. We kept that routine up for weeks. She'd brush me, talk a little. Sometimes she'd cry, not the loud, shaking kind. Just a few tears that slipped down without permission. I never barked, never moved toward her. But I stayed close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. She needed me. And that meant, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't nothing. Then one day, everything shifted. I was dozing in my kennel, half listening to Buck chew through a plastic bone, when I heard a voice I didn't recognize. High, soft, barely above a whisper. "Mama, is that him?" I opened my eyes. She was standing just beyond the fence. Small, pale, shoulders hunched like she'd learned the world wasn't safe. Her hand clutched the sleeve of a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. That was the first time I saw Lily. She didn't smile, didn't move, just stared straight into my eyes, like she knew something the rest of the world had forgotten. I didn't wag, didn't sit up. I just watched her. Something inside me stirred. A feeling I hadn't had since Ross pulled on the leash that day before the raid. Purpose. Real purpose. The kind that comes from knowing someone needs you more than they fear the world. That afternoon, Maggie came to my kennel again, but this time she was nervous. Clipboard in hand, eyes shifting between me and the office across the yard. "She doesn't talk," she whispered. "Not since it happened." I didn't know what "it" was, but I knew the scent of fear when it clung to a child. "She asked to see this one," Maggie said. Specifically, this one. That stunned even the director. No one asked for me, but she did. And just like that, they opened my gate. And for the first time in a long time, I walked out. Not because I was forced, but because someone, some little someone, was waiting on the other side. They brought her in slow, like she might break if the wind hit too hard. Her shoes barely made a sound on the concrete as she walked. Her left hand gripped tight around the hem of her mother's coat. The woman looked worn down, in a way that didn't come from sleepless nights alone. No, this was something deeper, something hollowed out. The kind of tired that clings to a person after fear has taken up permanent residence in their chest. The girl didn't look up when they stopped outside the gate. Her name was Lily. I remember the way it rolled off Maggie's tongue, soft and careful, like it was something precious that needed protecting. "Lily, sweetheart, this is Rex," she said, pointing toward me. "He's not like the other dogs. He's special." Special. That word again. It used to mean trained, precise, dependable. Now it just meant broken in a different way than the rest. Lily didn't answer. Her eyes never left the ground, but I saw her shoulders tense when I stood up in my kennel. Not from fear, from memory. I know the difference. You can smell it. Real fear hits like electricity, short, sharp, and sour. But memory fear, that's older. It lingers in the blood, in the breath. It lives inside a person and eats them slowly. Her mother knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "He's here to help," she whispered. "You don't have to talk. Just, if you want to say hello, he's listening." I stayed still, ears slightly forward, tail resting against the floor. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched her, with the kind of silence only those who've been left behind know how to hold. Lily inched forward, no more than a half step. Her fingers curled into her palm, and she took another. I didn't dare move. I knew what it was like to have someone approach you too fast, how it could send the walls crashing in. I let her come at her own pace, one slow step at a time, until she stood just outside the gate, the bars between us. Then, without a word, she sat down cross-legged on the floor. And just like that, we were eye to eye. She stared at me for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough for the room to fade. Long enough for the buzz of the lights to go unnoticed. Long enough for the ache in my hip to stop mattering. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She raised her hand. Not fast, not sudden, just slow, deliberate. The fingers trembled at first, like they weren't used to reaching anymore, and she placed her palm flat against the metal. I stepped forward, one step, two. Our eyes never left each other. Then I pressed my nose against the cold steel, right where her hand waited. The moment we touched, even through the bars, something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but something inside her untensed, just slightly. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A whisper of safety she thought she'd never feel again. Her mother gasped softly behind her. I stayed like that, frozen, committed. She was testing me. I knew that. Testing to see if I'd leave, if I'd bark, if I'd snap. But I didn't, because I knew exactly what she needed. The next day they brought her back, and the next, and the one after that. Each time she'd sit a little closer. Each time I'd take one more step toward her, until on the fourth day, the gate opened. She flinched when the latch clicked, but she didn't run. I stepped out slowly. Maggie had my leash in hand, but she didn't pull. She knew better than to interfere. Lily stood just a few feet away, hands curled into fists at her sides. Her mother whispered something, but I couldn't hear it. I looked at Lily. She looked at me. Then she did something extraordinary. She dropped to her knees, opened her arms just slightly, not enough to call it a hug, but enough to say, "I'm trying," and waited. I took one step, then another. Then I was close enough to smell the faint trace of apple shampoo in her hair, and the salt on her skin from a tear she didn't want anyone to see. I leaned forward, pressing my head gently into her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she wrapped her arms around my neck and held on like she was drowning. And just like that, we weren't strangers anymore. The days that followed felt different. The air in the kennel didn't taste so stale. The barking didn't echo quite so loud. For the first time since the injury, since Ross, since the cold ride to Silver Pines, I felt tethered, not to a place, but to a person. She started coming to see me at home, too. They had a fenced yard behind the house, small, patchy grass, an old tire swing swaying in the wind. I'd lie on the porch while Lily colored on the steps, her crayons spread out like a sunburst around her. She still didn't speak. But she hummed sometimes, soft little melodies I didn't recognize, songs only she knew. Sometimes she'd stop and look at me and smile. Not wide, not showy. Just enough to say, "I see you." At night, I slept by her bed. She had nightmares, always around 3 a.m. She'd thrash quietly, no screams, no words, just that wild, suffocating fear. Her mother would rush in, gentle hands on her back, soft murmurs of comfort. I'd press against her side, steady as a heartbeat. Eventually, the nightmares passed. Not completely, but enough. One night, I woke up to her fingers brushing through the fur along my scar. Soft, careful, like she was learning the shape of my pain. And I let her, because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't alone in it. There's a certain kind of stillness that only comes when trust begins to grow. It's not loud, it's not flashy. It's a quiet hum in the air between two beings who have both known what it's like to be broken, and who've decided, maybe, just maybe, they don't want to stay broken alone. That stillness settled into Lily's house the day I moved in. They brought me over in the back of Maggie's pickup. No fanfare, no paperwork ceremony, just a soft, "You take care of her, okay?" before she shut the tailgate. I watched her drive away through the rear window. She waved once. I didn't blink. I just tucked that moment away, deep down with the others I don't let go of. Lily's mother, Grace, led me inside. She didn't say much either, but I could feel the weight behind her silence. It was the kind that came with long nights at a kitchen table, bills stacked next to half-drunk coffee, and a heart stretched thin between grief and duty. The house was small but warm. Carpet worn at the corners, faint smell of cinnamon and laundry soap. The kind of place that had seen joy once, but hadn't felt it in a while. Lily stood in the hallway, her stuffed bear in one arm, the other wrapped tight around her middle like she was trying to hold herself together. She didn't smile when she saw me, but she didn't flinch either. That was enough. I didn't approach her. Not yet. I just padded to the living room, circled twice on the rug by the window, and lay down with my head between my paws. She followed, didn't sit next to me, didn't touch, just sat across the room and watched. That was how we spent the first few hours. Her drawing quietly on the hardwood floor, and me pretending not to notice the way her hand would pause every so often, like she was waiting to see if I'd vanish. Grace passed by the doorway more than once, her eyes soft, her lips pressed into a line. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She was holding her breath like every mother does when something fragile is finally going right. That night, Lily didn't want to sleep alone. Grace made up a pallet of blankets on the floor beside her bed. I took my place there without hesitation. When the lights went out, I could hear Lily's breathing speed up. Not panic. Not yet. But the kind of restless inhale that said her mind was walking into places it didn't want to go. Around 2 a.m. it started. The nightmares came hard and fast. No screams, just shaking. Tiny gasps, like she was trapped underwater. I stood up, circled twice, and gently placed my body alongside hers. I didn't lick her face, didn't nudge, just leaned in, shoulder to shoulder. Eventually, she stilled. Grace found us like that in the morning. She didn't say anything, just covered us both with an old quilt and whispered, "Good boy." So soft I almost didn't catch it. I never forgot that moment. Because for the first time in that house, someone believed again. The days that followed weren't perfect. Lily still didn't speak. She'd flinch at car doors slamming, or when men passed too close in the grocery store. She still slept with the bear clenched under her chin and refused to go near the front yard. But something had shifted. She started drawing again. Crayon pictures mostly. Simple lines, bright colors. A little girl. A big brown dog. Sometimes a shadowy figure in the background. Always small. Always far away. But always there. She started brushing my coat in the mornings, her strokes stiff at first, unsure. She was learning how to be gentle again. I was learning how to receive it. One afternoon, she was sitting in the grass with her sketchbook, her knees pulled tight to her chest. I was lying nearby, soaking up the sun, letting it warm the parts of me that still ached when it got cold. Without a word, she crawled over to me. I didn't move. She sat cross-legged beside me, reached out, and traced the scar along my side with the tips of her fingers. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't recoil. She just followed the path of that jagged line like it was a story written in flesh and fur. Then she leaned in and whispered something I didn't expect. I bet that hurt. Just like that, the world changed. Grace, who had been watching from the porch, dropped her mug. She rushed over, tears already spilling, kneeling in the grass and holding Lily so tightly I thought she might never let go. I stood beside them, unsure what to do. But Lily turned in her mother's arms, reached out her hand toward me, and for the first time, she said my name. Rex. It was barely a whisper, soft as a breeze, but it landed like thunder in my chest. From that moment on, everything felt a little lighter. We fell into routine. Morning walks down the quiet sidewalk. Afternoons curled up on the couch with old cartoons playing low. Evenings in the backyard, chasing shadows and chewing on squeaky toys I pretended not to enjoy. Lily started doing something new too. She'd give me hand signals, simple ones, like the trainers used back when I was still in the unit. 2 fingers up meant wait. A flat palm meant stay. A quick circle in the air meant come. She'd learned them from the therapy specialist, they said. It gave her a way to talk when words still felt like too much. But for me, it felt like home. Commands I hadn't heard in months suddenly came back to life, and I obeyed them like I always had. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. She was my partner now. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Lily sat beside me on the porch swing. Her feet didn't reach the floor, so they kicked in lazy circles. She looked out at the world, her hand resting on my back, and said, "Do you think they'll ever find him?" I didn't move. She wasn't really asking me, not for an answer. But I looked at her, steady and sure, and held her gaze. "I do," she whispered to herself. "I think you'll know when it's him." And deep in my bones, I believed she was right. Because sometimes the ones who've been hurt the most are the ones who recognize the danger first. And I'd already made up my mind. If that man ever came near her again, I wouldn't need a command. I'd already know what to do. Some nights don't end just because the sun rises. There's a kind of darkness that stays tucked in the corners of a room, even when the light's been on for hours. I learned that in the months I spent curled at the foot of Lily's bed, watching, waiting, listening to the silence between her breaths. She never screamed in her sleep. That was the part that haunted me most. Some kids yell, thrash, cry out for help. Not Lily. She'd just go still. So still, it scared me. Her hands would clutch the sheets, her legs would twitch, and her chest would rise so shallow it looked like it wasn't moving at all. That's when I'd get up. I'd nudge her side, softly, once, maybe twice. If that didn't work, I'd press my weight against her, just enough to let her know I was there. And slowly, she'd exhale. Every night was a quiet battle, one she fought without a sound, and one I refused to let her face alone. Grace tried everything: weighted blankets, lavender diffusers, storybooks on cassette that played lullabies I could barely hear. Some nights, she sat on the edge of the bed, brushing Lily's hair back with tired hands, humming church hymns in a voice so cracked it barely held together. But nothing reached Lily the way stillness did. My stillness. She'd wake sometimes with tears streaked down her cheeks. Her eyes would meet mine in the dark, and she'd whisper, "It was him." She didn't have to say who. We both knew. His name hadn't been spoken since the day it happened. Not by Grace. Not by Lily. Not by the detectives that came and went, asking questions that made Lily shut down like a light switched off. But his presence lingered like smoke in a room long after the fire's been put out. Grace told someone on the phone once, late at night, when she thought I was asleep. She's still afraid he'll come back, that he's out there, watching. I lifted my head when she said it. My ears perked, because so was I. If he ever came close, if he ever tried again, I wouldn't need orders. I wouldn't wait for permission. I'd stop him. But nights were hardest, for her, for Grace, for me. It was on one of those nights, with the wind rattling the loose gutter outside, and the heater humming like an old man trying to breathe through a tight chest, that something changed. Lily had another nightmare. Her body jerked hard enough to knock the bear from her arms. She curled into herself, fists clenched, teeth grinding. I stepped up beside her. This time, I licked her hand, not just once, again and again, until she stirred. She blinked, dazed and distant, her breathing rapid. Then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She sat up, reached for my collar, and pulled me toward her. Tucked her face into my neck, her little arms wrapped tight, like I was the only thing keeping the world from collapsing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. She wasn't trembling. She was holding on. Later that morning, while the kettle hissed in the kitchen, Grace knelt beside me on the living room rug, her hands, always gentle, scratched behind my ears. "You stayed with her all night, huh?" I nudged her hand. "She's different now," she whispered. "Since you came, it's like she's still scared, but she's not alone in it anymore." She looked at me like I could understand every word. And truth be told, I think I did. Because what she didn't say was that she wasn't alone either. That evening, a woman named Dr. Evans came by. Child psychologist, clipboard in hand, polite smile, perfume that stung my nose. She sat with Lily in the backyard while I lay a few feet away, half dozing but always alert. Dr. Evans spoke gently, asked questions that didn't push too hard, encouraged Lily to show her the drawings she'd been making. Lily flipped through the pages of her sketchbook, slowly, stopping on one that made Dr. Evans pause. It was a picture of me, and beside me, a dark figure, stick-thin, wearing a hoodie, no face, just eyes. "That's the man, isn't it?" Dr. Evans asked softly. Lily didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Her hand found mine, resting on the grass. Later that night, Grace asked if I could sleep on the bed instead of the floor. Lily patted the spot beside her. I hesitated for a second. Old habits, I guess. The floor had always been mine. But then she looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "Please." So I climbed up. From that night on, That bed was mine too. One evening, maybe 2 weeks later, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table coloring while Grace made dinner. I lay nearby, listening to the rhythm of the knife against the cutting board, the clatter of pans, the occasional country song humming from the radio. Lily looked up, her voice barely audible. "Mom?" Grace froze, turned slowly. "Yeah, baby? Do you think the bad man still remembers me?" The air stilled. Grace stepped over, knelt beside her, took her hand. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know this. He won't ever get close to you again." Lily looked at me, and for the first time, her fear didn't rise. Her shoulders stayed still. Her hand reached toward me, 2 fingers raised. The signal. "Wait." I blinked once. She smiled. And in that quiet moment, in a kitchen warmed by nothing but hope and spaghetti sauce, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me until then. She didn't just feel safe because I was there. She felt strong because we were there. Together. We still couldn't sleep some nights. The nightmares didn't vanish. But now, when they came, Lily would press her face into my side, wrap her arms around my chest and whisper, "You're here. You're really here." And I'd lean into her, steady and sure, because yeah, I was here, and I wasn't going anywhere. The day the letter came, Grace didn't speak for a long while. She just stood in the kitchen holding the envelope, eyes scanning the words like she hoped they'd change if she stared long enough. I was lying under the table, same spot I always took during the morning rush, quiet, out of the way, but close enough to feel the rhythm of their footsteps overhead. Lily sat on the floor beside me, building a tower out of soup cans and singing quietly under her breath. She didn't notice the change in the room at first, but I did. I stood up. Grace folded the letter with a slow, almost reverent motion. Then she looked at Lily. Her eyes were tired. Not the tired that comes from long nights or sick kids, but the tired that settles in when a mother realizes the world is asking something her child shouldn't have to give. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep with one hand buried in my fur, Grace sat on the edge of the bed and whispered it into the dark. "They want her to testify, Rex." Her voice cracked. "They're reopening the case. Said the man's in custody now. Said Lily's the only one who can identify him for sure." I lifted my head. I didn't understand all the words, but I understood her fear. She didn't cry. Not then. Grace didn't cry unless she was alone. That's something I learned early. Instead, she placed her hand on my head and said, "What am I supposed to do? She hasn't even said his name." I didn't move. I just watched her, steady as ever. Because I already knew. She wasn't asking herself. She was asking me. The next week was full of quiet conversations. Social workers, lawyers, therapists with soft voices, and thick folders filled with forms no one ever really reads. They all came through the house like guests who'd overstayed their welcome, smiling, nodding, stepping carefully like they might set off something if they weren't gentle enough. Lily grew quieter as the days passed. Not scared, not withdrawn, just still. Like she was retreating back into that place I thought she'd finally climbed out of. One morning, I found her curled under the dining table, not crying, just staring at the floor with her hands clasped tight in her lap. I crawled in beside her, head low, tail still. She leaned into me, without a word. That's when Grace made the call. "If she goes," she told the lawyer, "he goes too." "He?" the voice asked over the line. "Rex," Grace said. "She doesn't talk without him. She barely breathes without him. You want her to walk into that courtroom? He's sitting right beside her." They argued. Of course they did. Legal precedent, court policy, allergies, distractions, blah, blah, blah. But Grace didn't budge. Neither did I. When the day came, the courthouse smelled of cold tile and stress. People talk about how animals pick up on emotions, and I've learned that's only half true. We don't just pick up on emotions. We absorb them. They cling to our fur, sit heavy on our tongues, get into our bones. And that place, it reeked of worry. Lily held the leash loosely in one hand, her fingers white around the handle. Her hair was brushed, her shoes tied in double knots, but her face was pale as chalk. She didn't look up as we entered the courtroom, didn't glance at the gallery, or the rows of strangers, or the man sitting at the defense table. But I did. I saw him. And I knew. I didn't remember his scent at first. Not clearly. But when Lily's hand tightened on the leash, when her breathing hitched and her steps slowed, something old and deep stirred in me. I looked at the man, buttoned-up shirt, clean-shaven face, glasses perched just right, and my body tensed. He smelled familiar. Familiar in the worst way. Like the night of the raid back in Denver. Like blood and sweat and fear wrapped in cologne and arrogance. I didn't growl, not yet. But I didn't take my eyes off him either. Grace guided Lily to the front of the courtroom. The judge, an older man with silver eyebrows and tired eyes, nodded at us. I liked him right away. He didn't smile at Lily like some of the others. He didn't try to soften what couldn't be softened. He just looked at her with the kind of weight that says, "I know this isn't fair, but I promise to listen." The defense attorney objected to my presence, of course. Said I was a distraction. Said I might influence the jury. Grace stood and said, "He's not here for the jury. He's here for her." The judge nodded. "Objection overruled," he said. And just like that, I was part of the room. Lily took the stand quietly, her legs dangling above the floor, her hands folded in her lap. The microphone sat untouched. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Lily," she said gently, "we're not going to ask you to speak. You can answer however feels safe. You remember what your therapist showed you?" Lily nodded once. The prosecutor continued. "Can you tell us if the man who hurt you is in this room?" For a moment, nothing happened. Lily didn't move. Then, her fingers twitched, 2 fingers raised. My body stiffened, my ears snapped forward. I knew that signal. Focus. Lily turned slowly, her hand rising once more, and pointed across the room, right at him. The defendant shifted in his seat. The defense lawyer jumped up, objecting. Something about images and memory, about coaching and trauma and blurred lines. But I wasn't listening. I was locked in. My gaze met the man's, and this time, I let the growl rise. Not loud, not threatening, just enough to say, "I remember." The room went silent. Even the judge leaned forward. My growl rumbled deep in my chest, low and steady. Lily's hand found the fur at my neck and gripped tight. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to, because I did. Courtrooms smell like old wood and nervous sweat. I'd been in high-pressure rooms before, briefings in war rooms, drug raids in abandoned warehouses, search and rescues in collapsed buildings. But nothing quite hummed like that room. You could feel the air press against your ribs, heavy with eyes, human eyes, watching, judging, hoping for something to make sense. I'd never seen so many people look at a child and a dog like we were the center of gravity. Lily stood beside me at the entrance. Her dress was blue, her favorite. Grace had ironed it the night before while Lily slept, humming some gospel tune under her breath like it was a prayer. I don't think she realized she was doing it. People hum when they're scared, I've learned, even the brave ones. The bailiff called, "All rise," and the sound of shuffling filled the space. We moved forward, Grace with a protective hand hovering behind Lily, and me just slightly ahead, like always. I was trained to lead, not to follow. Still am. The judge looked at us when we entered, but he didn't smile. I respected that. Smiles are easy. Silence is harder. Silence means you're listening. He nodded once, small, barely visible, and we moved to the front. The man was already there. He sat at the defense table in a gray jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Neat hair, glasses, ordinary in the way predators often are. You wouldn't notice him in a crowd, and that's exactly the point. But I noticed. From the second we walked in, his scent hit me like a flash from a nightmare. Old fear, repressed rage, something deeper, something he was trying to cover with cologne and confidence. Lily didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed forward. But her hand gripped the leash tighter, and her breath stuttered in a way that told me she knew too. The trial moved slowly that morning. The prosecutor, her name was Diane, spoke with clarity and kindness. She laid out the facts like puzzle pieces, never pushing, never rushing. She was careful with Lily, careful with me. Her voice had that rare quality, soft enough to calm a child, strong enough to confront a monster. She called witnesses, neighbors, first responders, a therapist who'd worked with Lily for months. Each one added a layer, a weight, a picture that slowly took shape. It wasn't just about the man on trial. It was about what he'd taken. Lily's voice, her sleep, her sense of safety, her childhood. But the defense, he played a different tune. Memory is unreliable, his lawyer kept saying. Trauma distorts perception. There's no physical evidence linking my client to the scene. He kept using the phrase, my client, like that would distance the man from what he'd done. But I remembered. And more importantly, so did Lily. When it was her turn to testify again, the room held its breath. She walked to the stand, slow and deliberate. Grace stood nearby but didn't follow. This was Lily's moment, and mine. The judge reminded the room. Lily was permitted to answer with gestures, hand signs, comfort signals, whatever helped her communicate. The defense objected again. Of course he did. Said my presence risked influencing the jury emotionally. The judge turned to Diane. What's your position? She didn't hesitate. Rex isn't a prop, she said. He's a survivor, and right now, he's the only bridge Lily has back to this world. The judge paused, then nodded once. Objection overruled. The dog stays. Lily sat tall in the chair. She didn't look at the man, not at first. She just sat with her hands folded in her lap, breathing slow, her eyes fixed on me. I stepped forward a few inches and sat beside her. Lily, Diane said gently, can you tell us what you remember about that day? Lily blinked once, then slowly raised her right hand, 2 fingers straight up. The signal. Focus. I stiffened. My muscles coiled tight, ears forward, eyes locked on the man. And I saw it again. What I'd seen that first time in the courtroom. His reaction. Not fear, not shame, recognition. His body tensed. Just a flicker, barely enough for human eyes to catch. But mine did. Lily pointed to him. Not with anger, not with hesitation. Just a steady hand and a truth too old for her years. "That man," Diane said. "Was he the one in the van?" Lily nodded. The defense stood again. "Objection. She's been shown photographs. She's had sessions with therapists. Her memory may have been shaped, but Diane wasn't looking at him anymore." She turned to me. "Rex," she said, "did you serve with law enforcement?" I straightened. "Was your specialty in scent tracking and threat recognition?" I didn't move, but I didn't need to. Everyone in that room had seen what happened when Lily pointed at the man. They saw how my body responded, how my instincts took over. Because instinct doesn't lie. The defense laughed bitterly. Are we now cross-examining a dog? But the judge didn't smile. He leaned forward. "Miss Dawson," he said to Diane, "has this dog had any known prior exposure to the defendant?" She shook her head. "Not to our knowledge, Your Honor, but his behavior speaks volumes." The room fell into silence. Then, Lily did something none of us expected. She reached for me. Slowly, gently, she placed both hands on either side of my face. Then she turned me, so I was looking right at the man. And then she whispered, just loud enough for those closest to hear. "He knows. Rex knows it's him." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The man at the table paled. I stepped forward once more, closer to the defense bench, and let out a sound I hadn't used in years. Not a bark, not a growl, something in between, low, raw, meant for one man and one man only. The judge slammed his gavel once. "This court will recess for 15 minutes. Everyone rose. The bailiff escorted Lily and Grace out of the room, but I stayed, my eyes still locked on his, and for the first time since this whole thing began. He looked away. He couldn't hold it, because monsters aren't afraid of courtrooms, but they remember the dogs that chased them in the dark. They say the body remembers what the mind forgets. That must be true. Because when Lily raised those two small fingers again, just like she'd been taught in therapy, my body moved before thought even had a chance to catch up. It wasn't instinct from birth. It was the kind of instinct forged through years of training, reinforced by repetition, and now anchored in something much deeper. Love. We were back in court after the recess, though it didn't feel like the same room anymore. The walls seemed closer. The silence heavier. Even the light streaming through the windows had lost its warmth. It felt like something was about to break. And it did. Lily was back on the stand, her feet swinging just barely above the floor. She was quiet, calm in that heavy, inward way of hers. Her fingers brushed across the edge of the wooden chair, tapping softly. Grace sat just a few rows behind, her hands twisted together in her lap, lips moving like she was praying, maybe to God, maybe just to herself. The judge leaned forward. "Miss Dawson," he said to the prosecutor, "you may continue." Diane nodded. "Lily, earlier you told us that the man you saw in the van is in this room, that you recognized him." Lily gave the smallest nod. "And Rex," Diane said, glancing toward me. Your dog, he responded strongly when you gave a signal. Can you show us that signal again? Lily hesitated. Then she raised her hand. 2 fingers up, slowly, steadily, and just like before. I knew. Every part of me locked into place. My ears pricked, my legs stiffened, my breath slowed. I turned my head toward the man sitting at the defense table, and I saw it again. His face didn't change at first, but his hand twitched. It was barely there, a slight jerk, like his body had been jolted by something only he could feel. I stepped forward, one paw, then another, quiet, controlled. My eyes never left his. And that's when I smelled it, the sweat, the fear. Not the surface-level kind you see in someone nervous about being in a courtroom. This was old, rancid. It carried the memory of alleyways and locked vans and the terror of a child's scream muffled by a hand that didn't care. It was him. Everything in me said it. Everything in Lily did too. But I couldn't speak. So I stood there, locked onto him, and let the courtroom go silent around me. The judge turned to Diane. Has this animal ever been exposed to the defendant prior to this trial? She shook her head. No, Your Honor. And yet, he said, turning to the defense, we've seen consistent, trained reactions from the animal directly connected to the defendant's presence. The defense lawyer stood, shifting from foot to foot. This is emotional theater, a trained dog following the child's lead. It's projection. There's no science behind this. But Diane stepped forward, calm as ever. Your Honor, this dog was trained for tactical response and threat identification. He's served in law enforcement. His reactions are based on scent and behavioral cues, not emotion. And if this court can accept the credibility of a forensic expert or a behavioral psychologist, it can accept the instincts of a decorated service dog. The judge didn't reply right away. He just looked at me. I met his eyes, still and focused, and I knew. He saw it too. The shift in the room was subtle. A tension pulling tighter by the second. No one said a word, but you could feel the pressure mounting, like everyone was waiting for something to snap. Then Diane asked quietly, Lily, is there anything else you want to show us? Lily glanced at me. I was standing beside the witness stand now, close enough for her to touch. Her hand reached out slowly, rested gently between my shoulders. I felt her trembling, not in fear, not this time. This was different. She leaned forward, voice so quiet I almost missed it. He grabbed my arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The defense attorney stood again. Objection. She's never said that before. This is new testimony, emotionally coerced, possibly fabricated. But the judge held up a hand. Let her speak. And for the first time, Lily didn't need to be asked twice. He told me there were puppies, she said, her voice shaking but clear. He said they needed someone small to take care of them. And when I didn't move, he grabbed me. The room fell silent. Diane stepped closer. And what happened then? I couldn't move, Lily said. I couldn't scream. But I saw his face. I never forgot it. She turned to me again. Her fingers found my collar, holding on like she always did in the worst moments. And Rex knew, she whispered. He knew it was him. The man at the table didn't say anything, but his jaw clenched. His breathing changed, and then he stood up. Not fast, not loud, just slowly. Stood. Everyone turned to him, and in the stillness of that courtroom, he said something no one expected. I want to speak to my lawyer. Whispers erupted. The bailiff moved toward him. The judge pounded his gavel once, sharp and hard, calling for order. But it was done. The moment he stood, we knew. He knew we knew. They called another recess, this one longer. The judge ordered the jury out of the room. Grace scooped Lily into her arms, whispering soft things into her hair while I followed close behind. Outside the courtroom, Diane stood beside us, looking tired but hopeful. "That signal," she said to Grace, "was that something they taught her in therapy?" Grace nodded. "It's how she lets Rex know when she's scared." Diane turned to me, kneeling just slightly, careful not to break the moment. "You're one hell of a partner, Rex." I didn't move. I didn't blink. Because it wasn't over. Not yet. The man hadn't confessed, but he would. I'd seen enough in his eyes to know he wasn't the type who could hold out forever. Not against this kind of truth. Not against a girl who remembered everything. And not against the dog who never forgot a scent. Not when 2 small fingers could say more than 1,000 words. It was the sound that told me first. Not the howl of wind through bare trees, not the crunch of boots on old pine needles, but that heavy kind of quiet. The kind that follows people into dark places, where truth hasn't yet been spoken out loud. That's the kind of quiet we brought with us to that cabin in the woods. The day after the courtroom recess, the prosecution team showed up at our house just after dawn. Lily was still asleep, curled in a tight little ball with her hand gripping the edge of my vest, like it anchored her to the earth. I hadn't moved all night. I rarely did anymore. Grace opened the door in her robe, blinking back sleep. "Sorry to come so early," one of the men said, "but we need your dog." His name was Monroe, Special Agent, FBI. A man who'd seen more than he could explain and stopped trying to soften his voice about 10 years ago. His eyes were tired but sharp, and when he knelt beside me, I didn't flinch. He smelled like airports, black coffee, and secrets that weighed heavy on his coat. "I read the file," he said. "Saw the footage. I want him with us." Grace hesitated. "What for?" "We followed up on the soil samples found in the suspect's van," he said. "The compound, clay, silt, a specific mix, matches ground cover from one place. A private property upstate. Abandoned. Off the books." Monroe stood again, looked straight at her. "We think he's used it before." Grace's jaw tightened. She looked over her shoulder toward Lily's room. "She'll wake up and wonder where he is," she said. "I'll bring him back," Monroe said. "I promise." Grace looked at me. Just a look, that's all. But I understood. This wasn't about leaving. This was about finishing what we started. The drive north was quiet. I rode in the back of Monroe's SUV, harnessed but uncrated. He didn't play music, didn't speak unless necessary. Just drove with both hands tight on the wheel, and the kind of focus that said, "Something's waiting at the end of this road." The cabin was old, weather-beaten siding, moss crawling up the porch like ivy that had lost its way. The windows were all boarded, the paint peeled from the frame, and the roof sagged just enough to whisper danger without saying it loud. The team geared up in silence. Kevlar, radios, flashlights, sidearms. I stepped onto the ground first, and I froze. Not from fear, from recognition. The scent was faint, washed down by rain, masked by time. But it was there. Beneath the rot, beneath the mildew. That same chemical thread I'd smelled on the man. I followed it with my nose low, tail stiff, paws slow and steady. "Rex," Monroe said behind me. I didn't look back. I led them around the side of the cabin, past broken fencing and rusted lawn tools, until we reached the back door. That's where I stopped. Growled, just once, not loud, but enough. "Entry team," Monroe said into his mic. "Prepare breach. Canine signals presence of scent trail." They moved fast. I stayed behind, out of the way, but alert. The door burst inward with one kick. Dust clouded the air, thick with decay. The inside smelled of forgotten things. Blankets long unused, food gone bad, time. But under it all, something else. Children. Not here, not now, but once. The floorboards creaked as we entered. I moved to the far corner where the scent grew sharpest. Then I stopped again. Front paw lifted, head low. There was a seam in the floor. Not much, just enough. Monroe knelt beside me, used a flashlight to scan the wood. "Over here," he said. "Pry bar." They pulled it up slow, trying not to splinter it too loud. Underneath, stairs, narrow, dust-covered, leading into a crawl space no wider than a walk-in closet. I went first. The air changed halfway down, got colder, thicker. The walls were dirt, reinforced with wooden planks. A bulb hung from the ceiling on a wire, flickering once before going dark again. It smelled like wet cloth and fear. And then, at the far end, movement. She was small, filthy, curled into the corner like she'd folded in on herself to disappear. Her hair matted, her cheeks sunken. But her eyes still worked. She saw me, and she didn't scream. She reached out, fingers shaking, mouth moving, but no sound. Monroe was behind me in seconds. "Holy God," he muttered. "It's her." Her name was Emma Sullivan. 8 years old. Missing for 6 months. I stood beside her as they unshackled the chains. She didn't move until I did. She clung to my side the whole way up, wrapped her arms around my neck like Lily had done. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Monroe radioed ahead. Paramedics were already en route. Emma was carried out under warm blankets, an IV already started in her arm. She looked like a ghost, but her grip was strong on my fur. She'd been waiting a long time for someone to find her. And we did. Back at the SUV, Monroe sat on the back bumper with me beside him. "Damn dog," he said, shaking his head. "You just blew this thing wide open." He looked at me for a long time, then scratched behind my ear. "Thank you." We rode home in silence again, this time with the heater on full blast. My muscles ached, my lungs burned from the mold and dust. But I didn't care, because when I walked back through Grace's front door, Lily was waiting. She ran into me like she'd known all along I'd be back. "Did you find something?" she whispered. I lay down, rested my chin on her foot. She bent down, touched her forehead to mine. "I knew you would." And just like that, I closed my eyes. Not to sleep, but to hold on to that moment. Because I'd followed a trail before, but never one that led straight to hope. You can tell a lot about a man by the way he looks at a dog. I've spent most of my life watching people, not just following commands or reading cues, but really watching them, their eyes, their hands, the way their scent shifts when their hearts beat too fast. People talk about gut instinct, like it's magic. For me, it's memory, muscle, pattern. And when we walked back into that courtroom after they found Emma Sullivan in that cabin, I didn't need anyone to say a word. He knew. And worse, he knew I knew. The courtroom wasn't as loud that day. The whispers were still there, sure, but they had changed. Softer, heavier, like the whole room was holding its breath, and no one dared let it out first. Lily sat with Grace in the front row. Her hand rested on my back, but she didn't grip the leash the way she used to. She just let it lie slack between her fingers like she trusted me not to go anywhere. She was right. I wasn't leaving her side. Not now. Not after all this. The prosecution team stood taller that morning. Their voices carried more weight. Even Diane, always steady, had a fire in her that hadn't been there before. They introduced the evidence calmly. Soil samples, tire tracks, digital records tying the suspect to the cabin property. Then they brought up Emma's rescue. Her name was spoken out loud, and it rolled through the room like thunder in a summer sky. "She's alive," Diane said plainly, "and her recovery is underway. She has already identified the man who held her captive." She turned to the jury then, and her statement matches, down to the detail, the description given by Lily Carter. I could feel Lily shift beside me. She didn't look at the man, but she sat a little straighter. And I did too. Then they played the clip, a silent video from a courtroom camera. Grainy, black and white. Just a girl on the witness stand, 2 fingers raised, and a dog. Me, stiffening like someone had flipped a switch in his blood. It played without sound, but somehow it was the loudest thing in the room. The jury didn't move, the judge didn't blink, and the man at the defense table, well, that's when it happened. He looked at me, only for a second, and in that second, everything fell apart. I didn't growl, I didn't step forward. I just held his eyes, not like a dog, like something older, something that remembers. He shifted in his seat. Then again, his breathing grew shallow. His fingers tapped against the edge of the table out of rhythm, like he was trying to find an escape hatch that didn't exist. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something low, but the man didn't answer. Not with words. He just stared at me, and couldn't hold it. His eyes dropped first, then his shoulders, and then he stood, slow, hesitant. He turned to the judge and said 4 words. "I want to confess." Everything froze. No gavel slammed. No one gasped. No one moved. Even Diane seemed to pause, just for a beat, before she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "the prosecution is prepared to accept a plea deal in exchange for the full truth, including the location of any additional victims or accomplices." The judge nodded, expression unreadable. "We'll reconvene in chambers," he said. "Court is adjourned." The room exhaled all at once. Chairs scraped. People stood. Reporters whispered into microphones like they were afraid to break the spell. But I didn't move. Not yet. The man looked at me again as they cuffed him, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not shame, just recognition. He didn't see me as a dog anymore. He saw me as the thing that caught him, not with teeth, with memory. When he was gone, Lily reached over and buried her hands in the fur around my neck. She didn't speak, but I felt it all. Relief, exhaustion, a kind of gratitude too big for words. Grace knelt beside us and let out a shaky laugh that turned into something almost like crying. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." I didn't know if that was true. Not really. Because girls like Lily don't get to forget. Not completely. But they do get to breathe again. They get to walk into a room without fear trailing them like smoke. They get to laugh at things that don't carry shadows. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they get to keep the one who walked beside them when the dark tried to take everything. Lily reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly and held it up to show me. It was a drawing. Her, me, and another little girl with a crooked smile. Emma. All three of us standing in front of a house, windows glowing, a swing hanging from the porch, and above it, in shaky block letters, safe. I lowered my head into her lap, closed my eyes, and let that word hold me like a blanket warm from the dryer. Because in that moment, I wasn't a dog who'd been wounded or retired or sent away. I was a guardian, a witness, a voice for the voiceless. And maybe, just maybe, that's what I'd been made for all along. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't come from fear. It comes from peace, from something long awaited finally settling into place, like the last puzzle piece clicking into a corner you thought might stay empty forever. That's what the house felt like in the days after the trial ended. Not louder, not filled with celebration or music or people coming and going. It was still Lily's house, still small, still simple. But it was different now, warmer somehow, like someone had opened a window and let something good blow through. Lily started sleeping again. Not all the way through the night, not every night. But she wasn't waking in gasps anymore. No more thrashing under the covers, no more clenched fists or eyes darting in the dark. Now, when the nightmares came, they passed quicker. She'd reach for me without even opening her eyes, her hand drifting across the sheets until she found my back, or my ear, or the thick patch of fur along my ribs. And when she found me, she'd breathe deep and settle. Grace told people she didn't think Lily would ever speak again. Not because she doubted her daughter, but because she didn't want to need that kind of miracle. She'd learned not to hold her breath for things like that. But me? I already knew it was coming. Because healing doesn't shout. It whispers. And Lily had been whispering in her own way for weeks. Through drawings, hand signals, small gestures only I and Grace could read. She was talking. Just not with words. But that changed one Sunday morning. It was sunny. The first truly warm day we'd had since the leaves started to fall. The porch boards were hot under my belly where I laid stretched out, eyes half closed, listening to the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower and the clink of Grace's spoon stirring sugar into her coffee. Lily sat beside me on the swing, bare feet swinging gently over the floorboards, her dress swaying like the wind itself had hands. She had her sketchbook open on her lap. She'd been quiet for a while, pencil moving slowly across the page, her tongue poking out slightly at the corner of her mouth, in that way she did when she was concentrating. She didn't notice Grace watching from the kitchen window, didn't notice the way my ears turned toward her, even though I stayed still. She finished her drawing, closed the book gently, then slid down off the swing and sat in the grass in front of me. She looked at me a long time. Then, without fanfare, without preamble or announcement, she reached for my face, small hands pressing into my fur with a softness so sure it startled me. And she whispered, "Thank you." That was it. 2 words. The first she'd spoken in over a year. Grace came out onto the porch just as they left her lips. I felt her freeze behind me. Heard the ceramic mug slip from her hand and crack softly against the wooden rail. But no one moved. Lily didn't look at her mom. She kept her eyes on me. "Thank you," she said again, a little louder this time. "You stayed." I laid my head in her lap. Grace was crying now. Not the broken sobs I'd heard in the early days when she thought Lily might never come back to her. No, this was different. This was joy, breaking out through every seam. Later that afternoon, Lily drew another picture. This one was of me lying under the big oak tree in the backyard, my head tilted up as if I were listening to birdsong. She brought it to Grace without a word, handed it over, and pointed at the words she'd written in pencil beneath it. He never left. Grace framed it that evening. Hung it by the front door so it would be the last thing anyone saw when they walked out into the world. A few days later, Lily started humming again. Little tunes, half-remembered melodies from cartoons or lullabies. Sometimes she'd hum while brushing my back, or when she was coloring, or swinging alone under the branches in the late afternoon sun. But more and more, she began to talk. Not much, not yet, but enough. To Grace, to the therapist, even once, to the cashier at the grocery store when asked if she wanted a sticker. And always, always, to me. Little phrases, a soft, "You're my best friend," or "You're a good boy, you know that," or sometimes just my name, drawn out like a song. Re-X. It never got old. I'd lift my head every time. Tail thumping once, like my own way of saying I'm still here, kiddo. There was one afternoon, not long after the sentencing came through, when Lily sat beside me on the couch, her fingers gently tracing the edges of my scar again. She was quiet at first, then she said something that stayed with me like a tag on my collar. "I think you're what saved me." I didn't move, just watched her with the kind of stillness I'd learned from years on stakeouts, from hours in alleyways, waiting for something bad to move. She looked back at me and smiled. Not the small, guarded smile she used to wear, but a real one. Then she said, "But I want you to know, I'm going to save you too." And I believed her. Because in the time I'd known Lily Carter, she'd already done it. She'd pulled me out of a kennel where they'd forgotten I had worth. She'd taught me that protection wasn't just about obedience, it was about love. And now, she was doing the most powerful thing of all, giving me back a purpose, giving me back myself. That night, I slept in her bed again, like always, her arms wrapped around my neck, the moonlight pouring in through the slats of the blinds. But something about it felt different, not final, but full. Like a chapter was closing, like the story wasn't ending, just turning its page. I don't know how long a dog is supposed to live. Some of us make it to old age, graying around the muzzle, moving slower, our eyes fogged like morning glass. Others are taken too soon, on the job, in the field, before the world has a chance to say thank you. Me. I guess I've outlived more than just time. I've outlived silence, and fear, and that long stretch of years where I thought I had nothing left to give. But Lily changed all that. I wasn't young anymore. My body told me so every time I climbed the porch steps or jumped into the truck. My back legs didn't always move the way they used to. Stairs became something to think about, not something I charged at head-on. Grace started lifting me into the back seat on vet days, her arms gentle but firm, always humming some old tune under her breath like it helped me more than her. Still, I didn't mind the changes. Because the things that mattered most, they stayed. Lily still woke up with her face buried in my neck, her hair tangled in the fabric of my vest like she never wanted to let go. She still told me secrets no one else got to hear, about the boy at school who shared his pudding cup, or the girl who said her dress was pretty, or how the wind felt different on days when she wasn't scared. She laughed more now, out loud, free. The kind of laugh that starts in the belly and shakes the shoulders and makes the world feel lighter, just by being in it. And every time she did, I felt it like music under my paws. There were still hard days, of course. They don't tell you that healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings, she'd get quiet again, shadows flickering behind her eyes. Some nights she'd wake up shaking, gripping at the sheets, calling my name before she was even fully awake. But I was always there. I never stopped being her shield, her shadow, her safe place. We went to the courthouse one last time that fall. Not for a hearing, just to say goodbye. The judge had requested it, said he wanted to see the girl and the dog who changed the story. I wore my vest that day, the faded one, not the shiny one Grace had tried to sew up for the press. No, I wanted to wear the one that still smelled like old wood, courtroom dust, and Lily's courage. The judge came down from the bench and knelt beside me. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at me, then said, "You did good, soldier." Lily smiled. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Her hand rested on my back the whole time. We took one last picture before leaving. Just the three of us, me in the middle, Lily on my right, Grace on my left. It hangs in our living room now, above the fireplace. I see it every evening when we settle in after dinner. Time passed, like it always does. Seasons changed. Lily grew. Her legs got longer. Her voice stronger. One day, she came home from school with a letter in her backpack, an essay she'd written called "The Dog Who Saved Me." Grace cried when she read it. I just wagged my tail slow and steady, like I understood every word. Because I did. I always had. I started sleeping more after that. Not because I was sad or sick. Just tired, in the way old things get tired. The way trees rest in winter. The way the ocean calms after a storm. My days were still full. Walks, naps, belly rubs, and sun-warmed naps on the porch. But I could feel the clock in my bones. One morning, I woke to Lily's voice. She was kneeling by my bed, her hand brushing through the fur along my neck, eyes soft but watery. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I blinked once, slowly, pressed my nose into her wrist. She nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay right here." And she did. All day. She read to me from her notebook, stopping every so often to check if I was still listening. I always was. Even when my eyes closed. Even when the sounds of the house faded into something softer, quieter. That night, Grace kissed my head and said, "You've earned your rest, old boy." I wanted to tell her I wasn't leaving. Not really. Because when you love someone like I loved Lily, you don't ever really go. I watched the stars come out through the window, watched the wind ripple the curtain, listened to Lily breathing, steady and safe, wrapped in blankets that smelled like home. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't watching for danger. I wasn't standing guard. I was just here, exactly where I was always meant to be. I don't know how long a dog is supposed to live, but I do know this. If I could have stayed forever, I would have. If you've ever felt like the world forgot your name, like you were built for duty, not for love, just type 1 in the comments. That's all. I'll know what you mean. And if my story found a place in you, some small corner where old pain meets quiet hope, then I'd be honored if you'd stick around. There's more I remember, more I've seen, more I still want to share. So go ahead and subscribe. Not just for me, but for the ones who can't speak for themselves. We've still got miles to walk, you and I. and I'd sure be glad if you came along for the next one. Until then, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop listening to the ones who watch in silence. Rex.